In episode 99, I'll provide some group feedback for those of you who are taking listening and speaking 2. Primarily, we'll talk about pronunciation, showing enthusiasm, and how to answer philosophical questions. Hello and welcome. My name is Benjamin Stewart at benjaminlstewart.net. Before we get into today's topic, if you have any thoughts, insights, or experiences regarding today's topic, feel free to reach out to me at my Twitter handle at BNLEEZ. Today I want to provide some group feedback, specifically for those who are taking listening and speaking 2. This group is typically between an A1 to A2 English proficiency level. Today I want to give some feedback specifically as it relates to pronunciation, showing enthusiasm, and how to approach philosophical questions. So the first thing I'd like to share are some specific words that came up in our practice, all right, on Friday of this week, yesterday, January 28th, today's January 29th, but yesterday we had a speaking practice, and you were asked to talk with your speaking partner as it relates to the phrase, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And so in your conversation, some key words came up, and I want to review just a few words and ask that you check your pronunciation. As you listen to how I say it, it also helps to go online and use a dictionary, find an online dictionary that has an audio associated with each word, and you can also listen to how these words are being pronounced. So let's run down the list, the first being the word beach. Be very careful with the vowel sound beach, not to be confused with the word B-I-T-C-H. So beach. The second word, image. Image. The next word, things. Any word with T-H, things, 3, things. The word applies. Relaxed. Relaxed is a regular verb in the past tense. Remember, we have 3 different categories of ways to pronounce regular verbs in the past tense. In this case, relaxed. Almost like a T sound at the end. Relaxed. The word blonde, spelled B-L-O-N-D-E, blonde. So this refers to a person's hair. He or she may have blonde hair. Also, dark complexion. This can refer to one's skin. You could say dark skin or dark complexion, or fair skin or fair complexion. The word acne. Acne. The phrase sky tram came up. In fact, in the notes in Canvas, you can refer to the link to see some images of a sky tram. This came up in one of the discussions, sky tram. Visited, another verb in the past tense, another regular verb in the past tense, but this pronunciation is slightly different. Visited. So in this case, visited, we have an ID sound as an added syllable. So visit, present tense, 2 syllables. Past tense, visited, 3 syllables. Cute. Cute. A person can be cute or attractive. The word beholder comes from our phrase, beholder, and the word year. So these are some of the words that came up as I was listening. And again, check my pronunciation, check also with an online dictionary to get another example of how to typically pronounce these words. Now, the next point I'd like to talk about is how to show enthusiasm. So each week we typically have speaking practice, and of course some topics are going to be more engaging, more interesting than others. But I think it's important to try to come across in your discussions with your partner by trying to be engaged in the conversation, showing enthusiasm, right? Trying to listen very carefully to what your partner has to say and maybe link something, maybe a response based on what your partner has said. Also, pay attention to your nonverbal communication, your facial expressions, how you come across when you are speaking, maybe even broaden the intonation of your speech. So have highs and lows in your discussion, in your tone. All of these things add up to how you can show enthusiasm when you're engaging with your partner. And typically, your partner will reciprocate. As you're talking, usually one-on-one, how you show enthusiasm can influence how your partner also will respond. So try to keep that in mind and practice. Even if, again, maybe the topic is not high on your interest list, it's very important that you try to show enthusiasm when you're speaking. Of course, when you're speaking in English or in any language, but I think sometimes when we are really concerned about trying to articulate a message in an additional language, sometimes it can be a struggle to also at the same time be thinking about how we look and sound when we are communicating in this case in English. Now, the third point I want to share with you is give you a tip or a strategy or something to think about when you're trying to answer philosophical questions. A lot of the times our topics are philosophical in nature, and certainly this is a good example. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Basically, the meaning being that beauty is subjective. What you think is beautiful may or may not be what someone else thinks is beautiful. And so when you're asked to discuss this, especially in this case, when you're thinking, well, what can I talk about, right? Some of you were speaking about, well, it's subjective, and sometimes I think certain things are beautiful, and when other thing, maybe someone else has a different opinion. And all of that is true. But what I would ask that you try to consider is when you're faced with a philosophical question, try to begin the conversation right away with an example. Think of even the prompt in your mind. You don't have to say this out loud, but in your mind say, okay, for example, beauty. For example, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of beauty or beautiful? It could be a flower, it could be an experience, it could be a person, it could be a painting, it could be an music, an artist, maybe a musician who plays a beautiful song. A song can be beautiful. And just take one thing, take one example, and try to build on that one example in your discussions. Okay, again, whatever comes to mind. Now, if you've had time to think about and reflect before you have the conversation, then you can think, okay, maybe I'll talk about some flowers I received on my last birthday that I thought were really pretty, and I'm just going to stick to describing that those flowers, or even that event. Maybe you can combine receiving flowers with maybe something else that happened during your birthday, so it could actually be part of an event. But you pretty much focus on either the event, or if you want to get into the beauty of flowers, whatever example you want to share. My point is, try to zero in on an example that you can build and expand on. And when you're thinking about, well, what can I say about flowers, or what can I say about my past birthday that I thought was beautiful, think of the question words. Describe what it was, right? And describe how it came about, or how it materialized. Maybe think about the question word why. Were there reasons behind what happened? Was there a rationale? With whom? Who were the individuals involved? Right? And go down the list of question words, and if it helps, write down the question words as kind of a guide. As you're in the moment talking about that example, you can kind of glance down and go from one question word to the next. This doesn't mean necessarily that you need to address all the question words. But this is a trick or a tip or a strategy that comes to mind when I'm trying to think about, well, what can I say about this person, this thing, this object, in terms of describing it. So try to think about the question words. Think of anything that led up to that event or the object, any kind of historical context. This also can be something that you can think about. Maybe you provide a little bit of context before you talk about the what and the how and the why and the when and the where, with whom. Okay, that's another option. You can also think about a cause and effect, depending on what it is that you think is beautiful. Maybe there was a cause and effect involved. Maybe one thing caused something else. This could be something that you also talk about. But again, the idea here is try to avoid getting into this philosophical discussion. Even though it's a philosophical phrase, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. This is very much related to philosophical questions about, well, what is beautiful? And think about certain aspects, depending on the person, the object, the event, the place, right? Whatever it is that you want to talk about as an example of what you think is beautiful, think about certain aspects that come to mind, right? And this relates a lot to the question words, but it's also another thing to think about. If you want to describe the beach at a particular location, try to think about what aspects makes a beach beautiful. Okay, maybe it is the air off the ocean. Maybe it's the ocean itself. Maybe it's the sunset or sunrise. Maybe it's the people involved. Maybe it's the sand under your feet. Maybe it's certain activities that are going on the beach. All right, these are certain aspects also that you can think about. And it's going to depend, obviously, very much on the thing, the example that you want to talk about. If we're talking about a person, maybe we want to include the personality. Maybe we want to talk about physical aspects, appearances. Maybe it's something. Even when we talk about appearances, we could break it down to the face, the body, the gestures, the mannerisms of the person, facial expressions. All of these things are possible aspects of a person that you could include that you might think is beautiful. So notice that I'm trying to think of very specific examples first and then build a list of either aspects or think of the question words or some kind of historical context, etc. So I can just focus on that one example. And when you're really trying to think in the moment of something to say, many times this will, I think, help you get through a discussion. Find one example and then build it from there. Build out from there. Try to get into that example and stick to that example so that you're not kind of floundering with these very philosophical types of discussions, not really knowing where to go. Well, it depends. I could, sometimes I think this person's beautiful and other people don't, and then you move on to another example without really diving deep into that one example. So try your best to stick to one example and try those aspects of using the question words, finding certain aspects. Anytime that you can plan ahead and think ahead and reflect, maybe even try to anticipate on certain questions that will be the target for each of our weekly speaking practices. I think that's worth thinking about. Most of the time, our speaking practice on Friday will reflect what we've talked about for that week. Many times directly related to the tasks, right? The performance task that we completed for that week. So take that in mind. A lot of times you can prepare without really knowing exactly what will be covered for that speaking practice. All right, so I hope this helps. Take a look at the recording. All of our speaking activities will be recorded. So I think with the feedback that I provide, hopefully with my comments here today, along with reviewing your performance, right? Take a look at your own performance and see how you might improve your speaking. Today we talked about key pronunciation, key words that relate to pronunciation. We talked about showing enthusiasm, the importance of how you look when you're speaking and how you sound when you speak. That includes both verbal communication and nonverbal communication. And also, we talked about how to approach certain philosophical questions. Again, really trying to stick to one example, not trying to talk about all possible examples under the sun, sticking to one and trying to dig deeper into that one example. This has been In the Classroom, an educational podcast making teaching and learning more transparent. Thanks for listening.